Next topic, arrow function. So before understanding what is arrow function, we must need to know two other topics. Those are what is function and what is callback function. So only then we will be able to understand what is arrow function. So first, what is going to be a function? Now let's take, I'm going to write an implementation for calculating average. Right. Now when I run this code, I'll get the average. So I have written a very simpler implementation of calculating average of two numbers. So if I need to calculate average of another two number 30 and b equal to 40, again I will have to write same code again. I just don't need to initialize it, that's it. So you can see that same implementation has been written twice. Instead of this, what can be done is we can take this implementation, write it separately inside a block, give it a name, and name that as a function, and call that function whenever it is needed. Calculate average of, just send the values to be calculated as an argument or parameter. Simple. Remove this implementation. Now let's try running this code. You get the same output. So I think you can see the differences between the previous implementation and current implementation. For the previous implementation, how many times the implementation is needed, you have to manually write that many times. But now we are having a common place where that implementation is done, and we have given it a name and parameters. So whenever it is needed, how many number of times it is needed, we can call that function and that implementation will do the calculation for us. This is called as function. Now coming to callback function. So what is a callback function? A function that can be sent as argument or parameter to another function, that is called callback function. So what is the use case? What is the scenario? Let's see. I'm going to write a function to calculate sum of two numbers. So what this function will do is, it will get two values, add the two values and return the value. Now what I can do is, I can do some changes in this function to I will explain this keyword after entering value inside this. So I am just adding a variable here, removing this total or just commenting. Now see, I am calling this calculate average function. While calling, I am just sending this function name as a parameter. So in order to avoid confusion, I am just removing this second part. See, I am calling calculate average function and I am sending this function as a parameter to this function. While executing, this function will receive add function in the name of calculate sum. So in this 11th line, what it is doing, it will actually call this add function with values a comma b. So a is 10 and b is 20, which is received here, and that a comma b will be calculated, which means a plus b will be calculated and returned to variable total, and on the next line average will be calculated, and finally it will be printed. Now let us try running this code. You see, you get the same output 15. So this is a normal function, calculate average, and this calculate sum, which is this add, is going to be a callback function, which means I am not calling this function now. On the 19th line, I am not calling this function here. I am just sending this function. This function will be called only when it is needed, which means line number 11. It will be called back when it is needed. So that is why this is called as callback function. A function can be sent as an argument to another function, and it can be called back whenever it is needed, and that is why this is callback function. So now let us jump into the main topic, arrow function. So arrow function is a new feature that is introduced in JavaScript ES6. It is very simpler way to write a JavaScript function with shorter syntax. Let's see, I am going to write this same add function as an arrow function with a different name. For example, const, let's say total equal to, it receives again two parameter x comma y. We give arrow equal to an arrow here and a plus b. Now I am saying that this function and this function has an equivalent implementation. Both calculates the sum of two variables and returns it. But the difference is, this is normal function and this is arrow function. So what is the difference? The same implementation can be written in a single line without curly braces and without return statement. So the main advantage of this arrow function is to make the code simple, readable. Even I can write the same arrow function with multiple lines. Add equal to a comma b and arrow open brace close brace. Now I can do all the implementation inside this curly braces. Total equal to a plus b, return total. I can just remove this function. I can just send this add to this function, and when we run this code, we will get the same output. See, the same output. So instead of having that traditional function, we can have this arrow function, since it is very simple and readable with a shorter syntax. So what is the advantage of this arrow function? That was specifically single line arrow function. If the expression or the implementation is on single line, you don't need to add braces, you don't need to add an entire function. Instead of this, directly what I can do is, I can straight away instead of calling a function here, I can write the function directly here. A comma b is the argument that I am going to take. Arrow a plus b, that's it. So instead of adding that function separately and sending that argument, I can directly add the single line arrow function here itself as an argument, and that will do the same implementation for us here. See, so I can show the difference. See, instead of adding this function here, I'm just removing or commenting this function. I can write that same function as an arrow function in a single line. So this makes the code very simple and readable. And even if I want to make this as multi-line function, I can do that also. Very simple. That's it. So if we run this code, we will get the same output. So these are the ways how we can add an arrow function, how we can write an arrow function, or how we can send an arrow function as a parameter, both single line arrow function and multi-line arrow function as a parameter to another function. So specifically, arrow function is designed to have simpler syntax and also to send a function as a callback. It fits best when you send this function as a callback function. So now let's go a little bit deeper into this arrow function concept. What are all the special features when you are able to send a normal function as a callback function, and when you are able to send arrow function as a callback function, and when you can do all the things that function does with an arrow function, then what makes arrow function special or differ from the normal function? Let's say first thing, arrow function is created to make code simple and readable with shorter syntax. And second thing, when you have the expression or implementation in a single line, you don't need to have curly braces or return statement, and it will take it automatically. So these are two important features of arrow function. There are three other features that arrow function does not possess when compared to a normal function. Let's see. Let's write a JavaScript object for this. Let's say I'm having a key as name and a value hello. And now I'm going to write a function set timeout of. Inside that set timeout, I will execute this function after 1 second. I am going to write an arrow function here. Console log of this dot name. After executing this, I will explain. After 1 second, you got the value hello, which is the value of the variable key value name. So this is an important feature, both advantage as well as disadvantage. This arrow function, inside this arrow function, when we call this keyword, this will automatically point to this parent object, which means this arrow function does not have specific this keyword. By default, this keyword will automatically point to its parent object. So that is why when we call this dot name, instead of displaying some other value, it straight away goes back to parent object, which is obj.js, and searches for a variable or key value named name and gets that value and prints it. So this is one feature that arrow function does not have, which means arrow function does not have its own this keyword. It will always point to its parent object or parent code that is surrounding it. But when you do this using a normal function, that normal function will have or will point this keyword to its own implementation and not the parent object. Even that too we can demonstrate here, because we have the arrow function here. We have demonstrated this of the arrow function here, and we have the normal function. Let's say this dot first name equal to hi. Now I'm just going to log this dot first name. So we have declared a variable named first name which belongs to this function using this keyword, and we are trying to access that same variable using this keyword. Now let's see, this dot name here in the 7th line will point to this variable, whereas because this is arrow function, this keyword will automatically points to this parent object, whereas the function normal function, this keyword will point to the same function. See, so this dot first name on the 5th line prints hi, which is referring to this first name, and that's why we got this. And this dot name in the 7th line is pointing to name on the 2nd line. So that is the difference between normal function and arrow function, and this is both advantage and as well as disadvantage for arrow function, because it doesn't have this own this keyword. And next feature, no own arguments. For example, function add of or function say hi of console.log of. So when you don't send any argument, but we are just printing a keyword called arguments for a normal function, but we are sending values here in case of normal function. You see, this argument keyword will receive whatever argument we are sending, and that will print it as an JSON object. But this is for a normal function. I'm creating an arrow function without sending any parameter and trying to print arguments. You can see the difference between both the function. I missed to call it. Say hello of, I'm just sending 7, 8, 9, 10. We'll see the difference between both. See, first we have got this object for calling the normal function, and then you are getting error or some other data. So this feature, which means an arrow function does not have its own arguments in case of empty parameters or no argument function, but a normal function will have an argument. You don't need to specify arguments keyword here, but you can access the arguments using arguments keyword. But this is not possible directly, but indirectly, if you want to pass number of arguments, you can use REST operator. So explanation of REST operator can be covered in a separate video, but this is an indirect way of doing the same implementation. See, you can have it, but not without an argument. So this is another feature that our arrow function lacks. Now coming to last feature, let's say let's take this same example. Now I'm going to use this normal function as a constructor and see what response we are getting. Let hi equal to new say hi of 2,3. That's it. See, I can use my function as a constructor, but what will be the response in case of arrow function? Let's see. Let h equal to new say hello of same 2,3. I'm just going to remove or comment this normal function calling. See, this is not a constructor, which means arrow function cannot be used as a constructor. So, to summarize all the things that we have discussed now, a normal function and an arrow function differs in the way of writing a code. An arrow function is created to make code very simple and readable and with shorter syntax. Specifically, when we have the implementation a single line, you don't need to have a braces or you don't need to have a return statement. But the other differences, other major differences between a normal function and a arrow function is normal function can have this, but arrow function cannot have own this. It will point to its parent object. So this keyword is not there in arrow. This keyword will automatically point to its parent object. And second, normal function has its own argument in case of no argument function, but in arrow function it's not there. And the last thing, it can be used as constructor and cannot be used as constructor. So almost it is very clear that an arrow function is not a better implementation than a normal function in many scenarios, but it is mainly created to have a very short syntax and make code readable and easy to write. But in case of larger implementation, it is better to go for a normal function than an arrow function. So arrow function specifically for a specifically when we have a very small implementation, that too as a callback implementation, we can use an arrow function.